What's up, guys? You are watching Fite Feed, and we're going to dive into Dana White's Contender Series Week 5 predictions. I'll be going through the entire card, giving you guys my thoughts, predictions, and final picks for each fight coming up this Tuesday on September 9th, 2025. Let's go ahead and give our sponsor just one moment here. If you aren't subscribed to Fite Feed, f*** you! All right, guys, before we dive in, just want to say thank you for watching, and please, if you guys can just give this video a like, it'll help my channel, and I truly appreciate it. Also, if you're feeling very kind, you can do the new hype functionality. I would also truly appreciate that as well. But without further ado, let's dive into the picks for Week 5 of Dana White's Contender Series. Starting off with our first fight on the card, we've got Felipe Franco and Freddy Vidal in the light heavyweight division. They're getting about up against each other. So Felipe Franco is 24 years old, 6'1", no reach listed online. Tried to watch some of his fights, but guys, it's very hard to find tape on some of these guys for whatever reason. I did find some tape on Franco, but there was nothing specific about his reach, so that's not going to be in here. His record is 8-0, 0-0 in the UFC. Now on the other side, Freddy Vidal, 31 is what I believe his age is, but if you guys actually do some digging, all of the MMA sites don't even have his age from what I could see. I had to do some sleuthing and try to figure things out. 31 is what I believe his age is. Now the height for Freddy Vidal, I don't actually have any data there. I could not find any details on this guy for whatever reason. And it's weird because he's an American fighter. He actually trains out of Serra-Longo, but his record's 3-0. So I do have that. Taking a look at the styles for this fight, guys, Felipe Franco, 63% of his wins by KO, so that's 5 wins. 38% of his wins by sub, that's 3 wins. Very mixed bag of skills from what I could see. What I like to see from Felipe Franco is he's very agile on the feet. He can move a lot faster than what you would expect for a light heavyweight, and I think that speed and that agility is not only showing in his hands, but also his ability to throw kicks, switch stances, and also in one of his fights, get to the back of his opponent very quickly in a scrambling situation. So very agile on the feet. And as far as a weakness, it's like I said, it's very hard to find tape on both of these gentlemen. But on the side of Felipe Franco, the only weakness I could call out just based on what I have seen is just that, and it's not his fault, but he's only got wins over opponents who are either inexperienced and have a losing record. He only has 1 win on his record that was over an opponent with an actual winning record. I think that opponent was like 19-16. Every other opponent was either like debuting or 0-2, like no wins really. So not necessarily his fault, but that is something that you have to call out because it makes you question whether or not he's been tested by true talent or not up until this point in his career. Now on the side of Freddy Vidal, similar story there. Not a lot of tape, like I said, but he does have 66% of his wins by KO, 38% of his wins by decision. From what I've seen from Freddy Vidal, he seems to be actually very quick as well on the feet, very quick, fast hands, powerful hands as well. Like when he's landing some of these strikes on his opponents, he's either getting a visual reaction or they're dropping. And I also like to see that he has fast scrambles as well. He had a situation where he hurt an opponent and like quickly scrambled down, got to his back, and was just throwing some hammer fists on him, getting some nice ground and pound off. Very, very good in that area, it seems. But like I said, very limited tape at the same time. And so that is a weakness I have to call out. Like it's very hard for me as a fan of the sport and I guess, armchair analyst, if you will. It's hard for me to, truly outline a weakness if I haven't been able to see a lot of tape on this fighter. And that to me is just a weakness in and of itself. Momentum check for these gentlemen. We got Felipe Franco, who's on an 8-fight win streak. He last fought August 31st, 2024. So I don't like that he's been out for a year, but he is still a very young, prospect. Now, looking at his last 4 fights, like I said, guys, his last win was over a guy who was 0-0, so he's debuting. It was a really weird situation. They literally had an octagon in the mall. That's the one fight I was able to watch. It was actually kind of cool though. Like if I went to the mall and that happened, I would love to see that. Anyways, his other win is over a guy 0-1, and then the biggest win I would say is the guy who was 19-16 because that tells you it's like oh, this guy's not 0-2 or 3-5. Like, this dude's got several fights, and it's his only opponent with a winning record that he's beat. Then the fight before that, another debutant that he also beats as well. So definitely solid win streak, and he's strung together a lot of great finishes, if you will. But like I said, it's over guys that we really just don't know what their skill level is. Now on the side of Freddy Vidal, we've got 3-fight win streak. He is 3-0. He last fought on actually the same day as the International Fight Week card, which is 6/28/2025. So definitely more active. He's got wins over guys who also very limited experience. Wilson looks like he was 2-4. The guy before that's 0-0. The guy before that's 1-1. So really not much to write home about here, guys, from a momentum check perspective. These guys have kind of fought pretty either inexperienced or not very good talent up to this point. Intangibles and X factors. So when I take a look at this, guys, obviously neither of them are the home fighter. They're both going to have a bunch of pressure. What I would say about Felipe Franco is a red flag. Very limited experience, like I said before. Only has that one win over an opponent that's got experience themselves. And then on the side of Freddy Vidal, I think it's even bigger red flag. He's also extremely limited in his experience. But he did have some amateur bouts. So, he did have a bit of an amateur career before going into pro, but still just not as much experience as you'd like to see. But a variable on the side of Freddy Vidal is that he trains out of Serra Longo. So he's got that connection to not only a former UFC champion in Matt Serra, but he trains with, Ray Longo, who's, I think, a solid coach. Obviously, you've had some successes and some failures coming out of there, but a lot of those guys are really good. And I think that him having that close connection to like an Aljo, a Marab, even like Sadikov, he's got a lot of different guys that have seen success, not only in Contender Series, but also in the UFC that he does have a close knit to. And because of that, I think that is a big variable to call out on the side of Freddy Vidal. But guys, I got to say, I'm going Felipe Franco, and that the main reason I'm going Felipe Franco is just I feel after kind of digging into his record, seeing his skill set, I feel like he is just very well-rounded, and I don't necessarily see Freddy Vidal, at least from the tape I've seen, having something that will completely shut Felipe Franco down. But what I'm going to call out here, guys, is that in MMA, as we all know, anything can happen, right? And the big thing to call out here, especially in Contender Series at light heavyweight, you've got a guy in Freddy Vidal who, although I think he's a big underdog right now, he does have that potential. Given that I've seen his tape, he does have powerful hands. He does have that connection to Serra Longo, which tells me he's not going to be like a slouch on the ground. He's going to have ability on the ground. And so what I would say is if you're feeling risky, you could throw or sprinkle a little bit on our boy Freddy Vidal, because I do think that he has dangerous attributes that could end up maybe, getting the fight in his favor. But ultimately, guys, I have to go Felipe Franco for my official pick. I just think he has more experience. And from what I've seen, he seems to be a very skilled athlete, also very young as well. That's also going to play into his favor. But both these guys are still young, especially for that division. I could see Felipe Franco just based on what I've seen in the tape. I could see him potentially getting a submission if he hurts Freddy Vidal. But like I said, Freddy Vidal is not going to be a slouch on the ground. I'm not super confident in the method of victory, but I do think Felipe Franco gets his hand raised. 3 out of 5 confidence overall. So guys, my official pick is Felipe Franco. I do think that he brings just more experience and probably a better mixed bag of skills than what I have seen from Freddy Vidal. But I could be a victim of just having a lack of access to footage and understanding his game. So what I want to say here is that I am picking Felipe Franco, but if you guys are feeling a little bit risky, I don't think it's the worst bet in the world if you were to go with Freddy Vidal, given that he does have that close-knit ties to Serra Longo and probably some of those Serra Longo teammates. But in addition to that, he still has very powerful hands, and this is a light heavyweight bout, which we know could go either way, especially from a power perspective. If you're able to land a kill shot, you could be a way worse fighter overall, but still get a win over a better fighter if you're able to land that kill shot. I do think Freddy Vidal has that in his bag, but I ultimately have to say Felipe Franco seems to be the safer pick here just based off experience. All right, guys, our next fight on the card, we've got Chasen Blair versus Samuel Sanchez. This dude looks exactly like Coach Carter's son from the movie Coach Carter, if you guys know what I'm talking about. I can't remember what that actor's name is, but he totally looks exactly like the dude. Chasen Blair's 26 years old, 5'10", 71-inch reach in the 155-pound division, 7-3 record, and an 0-1 record because he lost last year on Contender Series to Cody Steele. Samuel Sanchez, 22 years old, a nice young whippersnapper getting in there. 6 feet tall, 155 pounds, 10-1 record, 0-0 in the UFC. Styles for this fight, Chasen Blair, honestly, like his name Chasen, he's like always chasing these motherfuckers around the cage. It's like a perfect name for this dude. 56% of his wins by KO, 4 wins overall. 43% of his wins by sub, 3 wins overall. I would say he's a solid fighter because he has a nice mixed bag of skills. He fights mainly out of orthodox, but he does and probably will switch stances quite a bit. He does, kind of switch to throw different kicks and things of that nature. So he's not just locked in that orthodox stance. But I think Chasen Blair is definitely a guy who just brings a fight whenever he's in there. He's mixing his attacks up at all points. He also has that ability to really mix in grappling or submissions if he needs to. A weakness though, I've got to call out for Chasen Blair. He's not in this career of like getting win, and then loss. Like he's kind of been all over the place. Like, I win one here, I lose one there. Obviously lost back last year in Contender Series, which I think is a weakness because he got hit, clipped to the body and finished. And so when I see that, I think that the main weakness I'd call out on the side of Chasen Blair, he just is very open for counterattacks from his opponents because he doesn't necessarily have the best striking defense. Now, Samuel Sanchez, on the other hand, not a lot of tape on this guy from what I can see. 70% of his wins by KO, 10% of his wins by decision. So he's really, 10% of his wins by submission, 20% of his wins by decision. So he's got 1 win by sub, 2 wins by decision, 7 by KO. Definitely a very solid striker, has a very long jab, mixes up his attacks very well too on the feet, but not a ton of tape on him. So I can't get a full read on things, but I do think he has some powerful hands. And like a big weakness here for me is just like, I really don't know what his grappling chops are. Does he have the grappling ability to fight off attacks if it gets there from Chasen Blair? That's where I don't know for certain. Jumping into momentum check for Chasen Blair and Samuel Sanchez. So Chasen Blair's 1-fight win streak last fought on April 26, 2025. He got a win over someone who was 5-1. Before that, he lost on Contender Series to Cody Steele, who was 6-0. He got a win before that over someone who was 8-2, and then a win before that over someone who was 9-7. Also fights out of Cage Warriors. So Cage Warriors, to me, guys, is one of the higher level, like, obviously it's a European organization, but very high level fighters coming out of there, very high level fighters that still fight there. So that is a big feather in the cap of Chasen Blair. He's also done this walk before at Contender Series. Samuel Sanchez, on the other hand, 7-fight win streak, last fought on March 30th, 2025. So both these guys decently active. They fought this year at least. And when we look at Sanchez, this is where I think I like to see that he's fought guys. When you look at his win streak here, especially his last 4 fights, he's got a win over a guy who was 17-5. He's got a win over a guy who was 7-7, a guy who was 7-11, and a guy who was 10-6. Now, obviously, you got a 50-50 fighter with 7-7 and then 7-11 is not the greatest record. But what I like to see about this is that he is still pretty green in his career, but he's fought guys who are seasoned, right? 14 fights for 1. You got 7 plus 5. What is that? 12? 4, 12. Yeah, it's 22 total fights. 7 and 11 is 18 fights, and then 16 total fights. So all of the, like, out of his opponents, he has fought guys who are much more experienced than he is. He hasn't been in a fight with a guy where it's like, at least in his last 4, where he was the most experienced and he's fighting like a debutant or something like that. So really like to see that he's had a lot of opponents who have tons of fights on their record. The intangibles and X factors. Chasen Blair and Sanchez are not the home fighter, but I would say that the pressure is definitely more on Chasen Blair, given that this is his second outing at Contender Series. So obviously, he's going to want to, at the very least, get a win. He doesn't want to walk out of there empty-handed yet again. A red flag to call out for Chasen Blair is just, I think his striking defense is very limited, and it makes him very open on the feet for counters, especially when he's going up against a counter striker in Samuel Sanches. Samuel Sanches, on the other hand, not the home fighter, tons of pressure, but he's still very young too. So just not as much pressure on his side, I would say. I would say one red flag for him is he has lost by submission in his career. And he's going up against a guy in Chasen Blair who not only mixes those attacks up on the feet, but has a grappling acumen as well, where he might be able to mix in some submissions. Ultimately, guys, I have to go with Samuel Sanches on this one. I think that just seeing obviously he's got a solid win streak put together. He's only lost one time in his career, still young, but I think the fact that he's also fought guys might not be in the same type of promotion that Chasen Blair has fought in. He's fought guys that have tons of experience. And so I don't think he's going to be going in there and just being completely shocked by what Blair brings to the cage. But Blair is a tricky customer, guys. He could, just because I pick one person, and you're going to hear me do this a lot, I still think Blair has an opportunity to win this fight, especially given he has a very solid game, solid mixed bag of skills, 100% finish rate, I believe. So I do think that Blair is not the worst pick, but I have to pick Samuel Sanches just because when I look at their game overall, I think Samuel's going to have the cleaner striking, and he's going to probably find those counter shots that either hurt Blair to put him away or keep him at bay and just allow Samuel Sanches to pick up steam in the fight and ultimately win either by KO or decision. I'm thinking KO is definitely likely, and I think I have a 3 out of 5 confidence. So it could be a KO, could be decision. We'll have to see. The next fight on the card, we've got Cam Teague versus Lerryan Douglas. So Cam Teague's 27 years old, 5'10", 69-inch reach in the 145-pound division, 9-1 record, 0-1 in the UFC because he did lose also last year on Contender Series. But a loss to Kevin Vallejos, who's a marauder in the UFC currently. Very solid talent that he lost to there. Lerryan Douglas, 30 years old, 5'10", 72-inch reach, 12-5 record, 0-0 in the UFC. Taking a look at the styles for this fight. So Cam Teague, he's got 55% of his wins by KO, 22% of his wins by submission, 22% of his wins by decision. So that's 5 wins by KO and then 2 wins by sub and decision respectively. So 2 wins in both of those categories. What I would say is that I think Cam Teague's mainly a pure striker. I feel like when he's got these submission attacks, it's usually when he's got his opponent hurt, which you do like to see it because having the ability to not only land ground and pound for finishing, but also having that ability to cinch up a submission is a very solid skill to have. I do love Cam Teague's game. He's got great hands. He does have good boxing defense. I know that his only loss was by KO, but he did lose to Vallejos, who's, as we know, one of the best combination punchers in the UFC right now, I think. At least I would say an underrated pick there because he mixes up his combos very nicely. He hits to the body, throws to the head. He's mixing in a lot of hooks, straights. He's kind of got a whole mixed bag of striking. And so I don't think that loss is that bad. And I also like that Cam Teague in that fight, although was definitely outmatched from a power perspective, he didn't let that deter him from, putting the foot on the gas pedal with his game. And I think Cam Teague is a very solid volume striker. He is always moving forward, trying to land shots on his opponents, giving them no space to breathe. What I would say, though, is that I don't know how well Cam Teague does when that pressure is kind of brought back onto him, right? When we saw the Vallejos fight, that's a weakness, I would say, is that Vallejos, obviously was getting walked down at moments by Teague, but then Vallejos did his thing and started walking Cam Teague down. And ultimately what ends up happening there, you see Cam Teague just get caught with too many shots and put out. So that is a little bit of a worrisome thing there, but it's also, I think, dependent on his opponent, right? I don't know if there's another guy like Vallejos who's going to be able to just go in there and do that sort of thing. And I think when you look at Lerryan Douglas, he's not that type of fighter either. He's more of a reserved counter striker looking for the perfect shot to put his opponent out. And what I would say that leads into some strengths on the side of Douglas. Douglas is 55% of his wins by KO. That's 6 wins overall. 18% of his wins by sub, 2 wins. And then 27% of his wins by decision, 3 wins overall. He has solid hands as well. KOs over some solid opposition when you look at his record. He definitely has that counter-striking ability to be a bit of a sniper and look for the kill shot on Cam Teague. I do think that a weakness on the side of Douglas is that not the greatest grappler based on what I'm seeing in his record. 40% of his losses are by submission. He's been subbed several times. So that is something to call out as a weakness on the side of Douglas. When we look at the momentum for these gentlemen, Cam Teague, after losing on Contender Series, strung together 2-fight win streak. He last fought on March 7, 2025. And guys, this last 4 fights is only MMA. Cam Teague also has done like some boxing matches where he also won by KO. So he's been a very active guy just in combat sports in general. But what I'm showing here in terms of his last 4 fights are only MMA fights, obviously. And looking at this, he's got a win over a guy who was 5-4, win over a guy who was 9-8, a loss to Vallejos, who was 13-1, obviously, and then a win over Austin Lingo, who's 9-3. And Austin Lingo, I've actually seen fight before as well. So really, when I look at all of that, I think that Cam Teague has been to this dance. He's had some experience, and also wins over guys who are not just complete absolute scrubs, right? Douglas, on the other hand, 4-fight win streak. Last fought on January 25th, 2025. He got a win over a guy who was 10-2. Before that, a win over a guy who was 18-3. Before that, a guy 9-2. And before that, a guy is 6-1, okay? So when you look at that, he's got wins over very solid opposition in his career. The intangibles and X factors, neither one of them the home fighter. I do think that Teague is going to have more pressure on him in this fight because this is his second outing. He's going to want to go out there and have a good showing or get some type of win, right? Like even if it's a decision, like just so he can at least, even if he doesn't get a contract this week, still be in the running for, being brought back potentially, right? A red flag though, he did lose in his last outing, right? And so that is something to call out. Now on the side of Douglas, still tons of pressure for him. He does seem to have bad grappling defense. So I don't like that. And guys, I gotta say, I mulled this one over and I'm even still kind of questioning it, but I have to go with the big underdog in Cam Teague. He is a huge underdog in this fight. And I guess from my perspective, I think having the Dana White's Contender Series jitters out of the way, like he might still have some jitters there, but it's not going to be the same as his first fight, right? And since then, he's kind of gone back. He's gotten wins. I think Cam Teague has a style that could be a very problematic matchup for the side of Douglas. Cam Teague is going to walk forward and try to just, completely put as much pressure on him as he can. And I think that could potentially melt Douglas. But I see this being more of like a, Cam Teague moving forward, landing shots, getting clipped with some strong striking on the side of Douglas, hopefully surviving. And I think as the fight goes on, I see Teague building into a win there versus it being like Cam Teague just KOing him. I think that Teague, like almost like McMillan, maybe not as crazy as McMillan, but I could see Teague just building into the fight and having more success as the fight goes on, and Douglas kind of having those powerful hits or powerful shots in the opening parts of the fight, but then having trouble with that pressure as the fight goes on. And I could see Cam Teague winning by decision. Now, a note I've put off to the side here, guys, is that I do think that Cam gets overzealous a lot with his pressure. So sometimes when he's moving forward with that volume striking, he gets very overzealous in that he starts throwing so much and so many attacks to the point where I think he opens himself up to be countered. And that is not a good sign against a guy in Douglas who has a bit of a sniper type striking. He could land a shot that puts Teague out. But I do think that if Teague is able to keep his defense solid and, move his head, but also stay forward on that pressure, he definitely has a chance of winning a decision. I didn't like to see how big of an underdog he was, but maybe I just get completely railroaded and he gets destroyed. But I think Cam Teague's got this one, guys. The next fight, we've got Shanelle Dyer versus Carol Foro. And guys, I made a little nickname for Shanelle. I said, Shanelle, a win here is Dyer because she needs to get a win. I thought that was hilarious. 24 years old for Shanelle, 5'6", 64-inch reach, 125 pounds, 6-0 record. She's got one thing to call out though, although she's 6-0 as a pro, she did have 11 bouts as an amateur, also had some fights with current UFC talent in her amateur career where she did lose, but she's definitely been in there with some different fighters, right? And Carol Foro, on the other hand, she's 28, 5'2", 62-inch reach, 8-1 record, 0-0 in the UFC. Taking a look at the styles for this fight. So Shanelle Dyer, she's got 67% of her wins by KO, 4 wins. She actually has a really solid head kick KO in the PFL that I'm pretty sure like someone had made a video, like Jake Paul like tweeted out about it because, you know, he's got that tie to PFL. But she like head kicked someone into oblivion. It was a solid head kick KO. 33% of her wins by decision. So nothing in the side of submissions on her end in terms of her professional career. Solid striker. I think that one thing I'd call out, as I mentioned before, she did have fights in her amateur career against Shauna Bannon and then also against Ivana Petrovic. Both Shauna Bannon and Petrovic beat Shanelle in her amateur career. However, Shanelle was very young, right? She's only 24 now. Those fights happened back in like 2020 and 2021. So a long time ago, she was, 19, 20 years old. She was definitely a lot younger at that time. A weakness, though, I have on the side of Shanelle is that she does have like criminally close fights against fighters who are like, I would consider lesser opposition. Like one of her opponents where she got a split decision was only 3-2. So it's like you kind of question like if a 3-2 opponent is able to like push you to that distance, does that? I think that's a weakness on her end in terms of her game. Now, for Foro, she's 75% of her wins by KO, which is 6 wins overall, 13% of her wins by sub, and 13% of her wins by decision. So the odds tell us, right, that if Foro's getting a win, it's likely to be by KO. She doesn't necessarily mix in those submissions nor those decisions very often. I would say that I like from Carol Foro her very heavy pressure kickboxing style, right? She's moving forward at all points, throwing body kicks, throwing some head kicks in there. Very solid jab, too, from Foro. I would say a weakness, though, is that most of her oppositions, they do have good records, but they're pretty much unknown. And, I think she fought in, UAE Warriors, if I'm not mistaken, which I do think has some good talent. But we've also seen people or fighters come from UAE Warriors into the UFC and just get absolutely dismantled. And so I just don't know, because of her opponents being more unknown, I truly don't know how much I can really rate those records of her previous opponents. The momentum check for these ladies, we've got 6-fight win streak on both sides. Dyer last fought 9-28-24, so she's not very active, right? And that is a bit worrisome. She had a win over Skatizi, 3-2, a win over another opponent was 9-2, a win over an 11-7, and then a win over a 4-2 opponent. So solid wins overall. And then obviously on the side of Foro, she last fought on March 22nd, 2025. So a lot more activity from her. She had a win over an opponent 7-2, before that a 3-1, before that a 3-7, before that a 5-3. Maybe the records aren't as good as I remembered there. The intangibles and X factors. So neither one of them is a home fighter. Tons of pressure, of course. Red flag still for Shanelle Dyer. Close fights with that lesser opposition is a little bit worrisome. And then on the side of Foro, she is much smaller at this weight class. She's 5'2" to a 5'6". So you're going to have a 4-inch advantage on the side of the height for Dyer, but also Dyer is going to have a 2-inch reach advantage. Ultimately, guys, I do think that Shanelle Dyer is going to get this one done. I really liked, obviously her being in the PFL. PFL is nowhere near the UFC, obviously, but they're probably the closest to the UFC when you consider other promotions in terms of that skill level. She's been in there with current UFC talent. So that tells me that Foro is likely not to bring something to the cage that Dyer hasn't been, inundated with or experienced in her past. Now, it was a few years ago, but still, I just think that Dyer has the better skill sets here. She's going to not only have the better skill set, but I think she's going to be a bit bigger and just have some more advantages that will lean in her favor for this fight. I see her winning by decision, to be honest. 3 out of 5 confidence. The last fight of the night, guys. We've got fucking Jelly Roll on Ozempic in Anthony Guarascio. And then we've got Steven Asplund, which, dude, honestly, if I was just to make a pick off the photos here, Asplund's got this one done, because those eyes, man, this dude's got that fucking 1,000-yard stare. The lights are on, but nobody's home. That is the type of fucking stare you want someone to have when they're going into a cage fight, okay? Now, I know you can't see it that well because I have their names written above their face, which I apologize for. When I originally pulled this together, this fight didn't even exist. It was a different fight. And so I had to put the image over them, and I wrote what their name was. And long-winded, guys, it just takes very long to update because my computer sometimes can be extremely slow, and I just wanted to get this one done. So anyways, jumping into the tail of the tape officially, we've got Jelly Roll on Ozempic, which is Anthony Guarascio. He's 31 years old, 6'2", 77-inch reach, 265 pounds. He's a big boy. 5-0 record, 0-0 in the UFC. Now on the side of Steven Asplund, 27 years old, 6'5", 78-inch reach, 5-1 record. Now, he is 6'5", as it says on Tapology. He does fight in the LFA, so that could be accurate, okay? And the reason I'm bringing this up is that we've seen in recent history, like Darian Abbey, for instance, Mr. 6'6" on Tapology, ends up getting booked by the UFC at 6'2". So to me, guys, I just don't really know anymore what if the height listed online ends up being like the true height, because there's a lot of questions out there too. If you guys have watched the UFC, like a lot of people online speculate that Israel Adesanya is actually 6'2", but the UFC lists him at 6'4". So it's like, I truly don't know anymore. But we'll see on the night of if Asplund is truly a 6'5" guy or if the UFC changes it. We actually just saw this happen too. If you go and look at, what's his name, Ante Delija, 6'5" online. I even looked at pictures of him and Tom Aspinall. They look very similar in height. He goes to fight in his debut. He's listed at 6'3.5". So I just don't know truly like what the height is, but regardless. The styles for this fight, Guarascio, 50% of his wins by KO, 25% of his wins by submission. And then actually the only other fight on his record where the only other fight on his pro record got overturned, actually. So Guarascio did KO that opponent, but it got overturned. I was unable to find out the specific reasoning as to why, but it was on the side of Guarascio. I don't know if he like failed a test. I don't know what it is. So don't ask, or you could ask, but I just don't know. More research needs to be done there. I did do as much research as I could. I couldn't get any details on it. But what I would say on the side of Guarascio, he's very light and nimble on his feet for a heavyweight. I really liked in his last fight that he had, very solid stance switching. It seems like he's very good at not only switching stances to mix up those different attacks, seamlessly mixes those attacks from orthodox and southpaw, and he does it in a way that it doesn't look like it's like a forced type thing. It's like a fluid, like he sees openings and he's able to switch those stances rather quickly for a heavyweight. And then also I just like how he's able to cut angles to land those shots, right? So like in his last fight, he did a nice switch from ortho to southpaw. And as he did it, he was able to cut a nice angle off to the right where he was able to land a nice powerful lead right hand on his opponent. And then he did the opposite where he was also able to land a straight right hand from ortho, doing that exact same type of movement. So very solid striking from what I can see. Also seems to have a bit of a chin. He did get caught in his last fight, but he like ate it nicely and then returned fire. So solid skills there. On the side of Steven Asplund, 80% of his wins are by KO, which I believe was 4 wins overall, and then 20% of his wins by decision, so just 1 win. I would say that Asplund's definitely got heavy hands. He also calls himself the heavyweight Max Holloway, which is kind of interesting. Like when I watch his fight, he definitely has Max Holloway-esque traits where he's just constantly pressuring and moving forward. And although he's, a heavyweight and he's also got like, a bit of that saggy belly, but he is got that cardio. It's like, dude, the weirdest thing. It's like, I feel like I see guys with like the saggy, I don't want to call it saggy. I guess it is saggy, but like the guys that have like a physique where you're like, dude, there's no way this dude could last 15 minutes seem to have like the best fucking gas tanks. And then you see like a dude who's like thin or a guy who's like ripped. Obviously the ripped guys we know are not going to have good gas tanks, but like the dudes that are like thin gassing out before someone like that is crazy. But I would say the only weakness on the side of Asplund that I can see thus far is because he's always pressuring. He does have that ability to be open on the feet, but then also he is only lost 1 time in his career, but it was by submission. And Guarascio, I don't think as a pro, he doesn't have a ton of subs as a pro, but in his in his career before being a pro and amateur, I think he had several wins by guillotine. So he has a submission game that he can bring to this fight. But really when I see the weaknesses, Asplund, lost by submission. And then on the side of Guarascio, very limited professional experience thus far. Momentum check for these gentlemen. Guarascio's 3-fight win streak, Asplund 2-fight win streak. Guarascio fought 4/19/25. Asplund fought a week prior, basically, on 4/11/25. When we look at their last 4 fights, Guarascio fought Schoenfelder, who I believe also fought in Contender Series previously and lost. Schoenfelder was 5-1 when they met and was a champion in CFC or CFFC. And Guarascio, that's the fight I was talking about, guys, where he went out there and he was able to get a win by KO and take the belt. Before that, a win over a guy 1-0, another guy 1-0, another guy 1-5. So limited professional experience, to say the least. And also, the last 4 fights, the one was over Watterson was a no contest. It was originally a KO on the side of Guarascio, but it got overturned. Now, on the side of Asplund, we've got a win over a guy's 3-2, a win over a guy 3-1, a win over a guy 4-1, or no, a loss, to a guy 4-1, and then a win over a guy who was 5-1. So he's been in there with guys who are also limited in experience, but at the very least, 3 of the last 4 had solid winning records, where even though his last fight was over a guy who has a winning record, it wasn't like it's a 3-2, right? So nothing really crazy to write home about there. When we get to the intangibles and X factors, neither one of these guys are home fighters here. I think obviously the red flags, obviously on the side of Guarascio is just that limited professional experience. And then on the side of Asplund, obviously having a loss by submission is a bit worrisome for me, given that Guarascio has the potential to mix that in. Ultimately, guys, I got to go Guarascio. The reason I go Guarascio here is just I think that although Asplund has great pressure, great chin, has actually, I feel, just as much of a chance to win this fight, right? If he's able, this is a heavyweight bout, if he's able to apply that pressure, and Asplund really mixes up those head kicks too, like he'll throw head kicks out there. He'll do a lot more nimble attacks than you would see most heavyweights attempt in a cage. But I do think when I watch Guarascio, he does have a kickboxing background as well before he became a professional. And I think Guarascio has those very clean stance switches, which not only set him up for more opportunities to find those KO shots, it also is confusing to an opponent, especially I think if Asplund's consistently moving forward and Guarascio is able to kind of cut angles, switch stances, and land. I think that Asplund seems to be too open on the feet to be countered by those attacks, and that is where I have to lean Guarascio potentially getting a KO, because I just think that he'll be able to mix in that stance switching and find some sort of shot that either clips Asplund, dropping him, and then, Guarascio landing ground and pound or throwing up a sub, or straight up just landing a kill shot that just drops him and puts him out bad. I just think Guarascio is going to be able to mix that attack up and find that kill shot. But I'm not ever 1,000% confident in any of these things. As you guys can see, 3 out of 5 confidence for all of these. So what I would say, guys, is if you're feeling a little bit risky, maybe just tune into our boy Yanni the Greek, see what he's got going on for those bets. You could go with Asplund as a winner here. I think that it's not like the worst bet in the world, but I would say if you're really going to go for an underdog, my pick would be Cam Teague. But there you guys have it. That is my predictions for week 5 of Contender Series. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please give this video a like if you enjoyed, or just give the video a like because you want to support the channel. I also would appreciate that. Once again, if you're feeling very kind, you can also use the new hype functionality and hype this video for me so I can reach a larger community within the MMA space. Guys, I just want to say that I truly appreciate each and every one of you who tune into these videos. It really means the world to me. So thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for subscribing to Fite Feed. And if you haven't subscribed, please do what our sponsor says and just subscribe to Fite Feed. Thank you guys so much. I'll see you in the next one.